Good evening. It's time for another bedtime story with Alan. So when it's bedtime, come back and I will share with you another one of my favorite bedtime stories growing up. This is another book by V. Gilbert Beers that was published in Nashville, Tennessee. It is titled The House in the Hole in the Side of the Tree. "Well, what do you want?" Squire Squirrel growled. He looked so angry that the Chipmunk twins almost ran away. That is, do you have a hammer that we can borrow?" they answered, almost whispering. "No!" shouted Squire Squirrel. "What do you think this is, a hardware store?" Then he slammed the door so hard that the tree shook, and his house in the hole in the side of the tree shook too. Squire mumbled and grumbled all the way through the house and up the stairs. He looked around his house to be sure that it was all right. He had not made the house very well. He knew that he must stop slamming doors or the whole house would fall down. "I really should build a better house in a better place," Squire grumbled to himself. "These neighbors never do anything for me. All they ever do is borrow hammers and things." Of course, Squire never thought to ask himself what he did for his neighbors. Just then, Squire heard something at the window. "Yoo-hoo," someone said. Squire opened his window and stared into the face of Oscar Owl sitting on a big limb of a big tree. "Nosy neighbors," Squire mumbled. "They're even sitting in trees outside my window. What do you want, Oscar?" "What do I want?" Oscar began to think. "Yes, what do I want? I seem to have forgotten. I know that I was to remember not to forget something, but now I've forgotten what it is I was supposed to remember not to forget." "I suppose you want to borrow something as well," Squire shouted. "Why, yes, of course," said Oscar. "How thoughtful of you to remember. But what was I to borrow? Let me think. Oh, yes, I need a steasuring mick. Oh, dear, no, I mean a measuring stick." Squire slammed his window so hard that a board fell from his house in the hole in the side of the tree. "If I had a measuring stick, I'd wrap it around his silly neck," Squire grumbled. Squire flopped down into a big chair. It was very quiet now in the house. He thought for a moment that it would be nice to have some friends, but just as he started to think that, he heard a noise outside. Bang! Bang! Crash! Bang! Squire ran to the window and opened it wide. He could not see anything special, but he could still hear that noise. Then Squire shouted as loud as he could, "Will you be quiet?" Of course, Squire didn't know that he was making more noise than the noise was making. Squire had just slammed the window shut when he heard someone knocking on the door downstairs. When he opened it, there were his next tree neighbors smiling and looking like very happy squirrels. "Do you have a saw that we could borrow?" they started to say, but Squire slammed the door without bothering to answer. That night, Squire lay in his bed for a long time, looking up at the big moon over his next tree neighbors. He felt very lonely and felt very sad. Squire knew that he really wanted some friends, but he knew that he would never have friends by slamming doors and windows and shouting when they tried to be friendly. With these thoughts running through his mind, Squire fell asleep. While he slept, Squire dreamed that a hammer and a saw were chasing him. He ran to each neighbor's house to ask for help, but each time he tried to talk, someone slammed a door or a window. At last, the hammer and saw chased him all the way home. As he locked himself in his house, Squire felt more lonely and sad than he had ever felt. Then he sat down and cried. but there was no friend to help him feel any better. The next morning, Squire woke up suddenly. Someone was knocking at his door. He ran down the steps and opened the door. Squire almost expected to see the big hammer and saw standing there, ready to chase him again. But instead, he saw all his neighbors laughing and looking very happy. Squire started to ask, "Well, what do you want?" But he didn't. Then he started to slam the door. But he didn't. He kept thinking about his dream. He knew how it felt to have someone slam a door when you came to see them. Squire was happy that a hammer and saw were not chasing him now. He was very happy that his neighbors were not slamming doors, and he was very, very happy that they had come to see him. "Will you come in?" Squire asked. "Will you have breakfast with me?" "Later," they all shouted cheerfully. "Come with us. We have a surprise for you." Then Squire's neighbors took him to a big tree not far away. In the side of the big tree there was a big hole, and in the big hole there was a beautiful new house. "It's your new house," they all shouted. "We made it for you because we like you and want to be your friends." Squire Squirrel was so ashamed that he could not even look at his wonderful neighbors. While he had been shouting at them, they had been building him a beautiful new house. "I'm sorry I've been so grumpy," he said. "I'll never slam a door or window again when you come to see me." "Dear me," said Oscar the Owl, "I seem to have forgotten to remember that you slam doors and windows." The Chipmunk twins began to laugh. Then the next tree neighbors, who weren't next tree neighbors anymore, began to laugh too. Even Squire Squirrel began to laugh. Then all the friends went inside to look at Squire's new house in the hole in the side of the tree. I hope all of you sleep well, sleep tight, don't let the bedbugs bite, and I look forward to seeing you again.